There's some books that just leave a lasting impact on you. Maybe you don't remember most of the details. Maybe you remember very few of the details. But there was that one line, that one sentence, maybe that one idea that stuck with you, that you can't get out of your mind, that's impacted your heart. Today I want to share with you 3 Christian living books that have done just that for me. These are books that I've read, some a number of years ago. A few of them I've revisited a few times, but they're books that for various reasons have impacted me in a profound way. Books that I come back to in my thinking every now and then. But first I want to take a minute to kind of define what do we mean by a Christian living book. These aren't fluffy by any means. Maybe you're thinking of in your generic Christian bookstore, the very fluffy, full of story type of book that's supposed to inspire you to be a happier person, to be a more joyful person, to be a more generous person. These aren't that kind of book, although they do inspire in many ways. Neither are these theological treatises. Most of these are short, maybe 200 pages at most. But what I want to communicate by a Christian living book is that they take theology, they take what the Bible teaches, and in a very deep, in a very meaningful, in a very intentional way, they try to teach us how we're to live, how we're to view God, how we're to view ourselves, how we're to view the world around us, and how we're to live for Jesus in light of that. These 3 books have left a profound impact on me, as I've said, and they do just that. They take who is God, who am I, what is the world, what's wrong with the world, and how do we live, how do I live in light of that. So before I blab on more, let's get to what these 3 books are. So first of all, the first Christian living book that I cannot get out of my head that's left a profound impact on me is John Piper's Don't Waste Your Life. This is one that I've read numerous times. I think I've read it 3 times altogether. One year when I was in university, our young adults group did the video series and discussion guide as a Bible study or just a study together. Piper's, perhaps you know John Piper for his Christian hedonism idea, that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. And he certainly applies that paradigm in this book. This book, I believe, was formed out of what may be his famous seashell sermon. And he uses that illustration in this book where he talks about a retired couple that has moved down to Florida. They've bought a yacht and they spend their retirement years, early retirement years, I should say, cruising around on their yacht, playing softball, collecting seashells. And he brings out the tragedy. Piper brings out the tragedy in a powerful way in his powerful John Piper-like writing style by saying, imagine Jesus comes back, and what do they have to say? Here, Jesus, look at my seashells. And he compares that to 2 older women who had given years of their lives as medical missionaries in Africa who died in a car accident. And he sets these 2 stories against each other, and he says, which is the wasted life? Which life was lived in the true sense to the full? And which life was wasted? He tells his story of coming to the realization that glorifying God is not opposed to our joy, that the 2 are actually combined, that our joy is found in living for God, in glorifying God. That's, in a nutshell, his Christian hedonism idea. And in Don't Waste Your Life, he goes through all kinds of different areas of our life, our work, our recreation, suffering, missions, many areas of life, I should say, he discusses in this framework of the fact that the life that isn't wasted is a life that recognizes that our joy is found in glorifying God, and therefore we seek to glorify God in our work, in our money, in our time, in our relationships. And so it left a very profound impact on me that I keep going back to, not necessarily every day, but there will be times where, just the question of what makes life worth living, or how can I truly live my life in a way that isn't wasted, that glorifies God. John Piper's book, Don't Waste Your Life, has had a profound impact on me for that reason. The second book that has had a deep, profound, a lasting impact for me is this book right here, called God in the Dark by Guinness. The subtitle is The Assurance of Faith Beyond a Shadow of the Doubt, and it's a book about doubt. It's a book about what is doubt, what do we do when we doubt, what kind of doubts are there. And to frame this up, I want to tell a bit of a story, a bit of my story, that will help unpack why this has been such an influential book for me. In my last year of university, 2013, I was really wrestling with, am I called to ministry? I had gone to university to study history, had figured being a history teacher was the way to go, was what you could do with a history degree. But over the years, and especially my last year, I was really wrestling with, is God calling me to ministry of some kind, to pastoral ministry or I don't know, some kind of ministry. And so at that point, I'd gotten into reading more, reading books like the ones that I've mentioned already, getting into kind of Christian living theology reading. And I'd gotten this one. I think there was a sale at the campus bookstore where I went. And I remember picking it up towards, I think, the summer of 2013. I had just graduated from university. I'd started a ministry job, a youth ministry position at a church, a small church. And I was reading this book. And I remember my dad picking me up from Hamilton, the city I was living in at that time. And I was just about done. And I remember talking to him about this book. As I'd started to do, as I'd started reading more, I was always talking to my dad about what I was reading. Anyway, I finished the book that summer, and it was helpful. In ways I had I wouldn't call it crisis of faith, but I had questions about Christianity, about my own faith, and wrestling with doubts in various ways. And what Guinness does in this book is he starts out by defining that doubt is not the absence of faith. Doubt is somewhere in between faith and unbelief. It's that tension somewhere in between the two. It can slide quickly to unbelief if it's left unchecked, but doubt itself is not unbelief. And that's part one of the book, which is titled, I Am, Therefore I Doubt, or something along those lines. He's unpacking that doubt is part of the human experience. And then in part two, he goes through various biblical illustrations of people who doubted and categorizes them into 7 types of doubt. And then in part 3, he has 2 chapters that really deal with the problem of evil, we could say. One chapter is called Why, O Lord? And the other chapter in part 3 is How Long, O Lord? And it's dealing with doubt in the face of tragedy, in the face of trial. In August 2013, my dad died in a traffic accident. He was cycling and he was hit by a vehicle. I just finished this book just before, maybe a month before he died. And as I was wrestling with what I was feeling, as I was grieving, and as I had the why questions, God, why? I needed him. I feel so lost without him. At one point, my mind was drawn back to the Why, O Lord chapter in this book. And it provided a lot of comfort for me. It freed me from really the burden of feeling I had to find answers. Because as Guinness says in that chapter, we can take comfort in the fact that even though we don't know why something happened, we know the one who does know why. And the fact that I didn't have to find the answers, but I could rest in that God knew the answers and that God was good, profoundly helped me in that season of my life. It freed me, as I said, from this crushing weight that I felt of having to find the answers to why this tragedy had happened. So the second book, for that reason, and it's just a good book, a very helpful book. The second book that's left a profound impact on me is God in the Dark by Os Guinness. The third book I want to mention in many ways is a modern classic. It's another book that I've read, I think, 3 times total now. It's this book right here, The Prodigal God by Tim Keller. My first exposure to Keller was his book, The Reason for God. I remember going to a Christian bookstore and my dad buying that for me and reading it on Christmas break one year in university. But I picked this one up a few years later. And after I finished university, probably 2 years after I finished university, I finally picked it up. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon in between church services. I picked it up and I started reading, and it quickly became one of my favorite books of all time. What Keller does is he takes the story of the prodigal son, the parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15. And what was so helpful for me reading this book is that he starts off by setting the context in the opening verses of Luke 15, where the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders of the day are upset at Jesus because he's eating and drinking with tax collectors and with people they categorize as great sinners. And Jesus tells 3 parables. If you read Luke 15, he tells 3 parables in short order. One about a lost sheep, one about a lost coin, and then this one that's commonly known as the prodigal son. But Keller's argument throughout the book is that this is actually a story about 2 lost sons. Just one son is more obviously lost than the other. And as he unpacks the story, he compares the younger brother who goes to the father and says, "Give me everything, give me my inheritance, I'm done here, I'm going to go away." And that son who parties and who squanders all his father's wealth, all his inheritance. You know, as those who good Christian people would categorize as sinful people today. People who perhaps live loosely, who like to party it up and that kind of thing. But then Keller switches and he also talks about this older brother who stays home, who by all appearances is very good, who follows his father's orders, who works hard on his father's farm. But when Keller talks about him, he argues that this son is lost as well. Because at the end of the story, this older brother refuses to go into the celebration when the younger brother comes back. And his reason, if you read the story in Luke 15, the older brother's reasons is that, "Father, I've worked hard for you. I've done everything you wanted me to. You haven't even given me a goat that I might celebrate with my friends. And this son who wasted all your money, who ran away, he comes back and you throw a party for him, not me." And what Keller says is that this is self-righteousness. This is a dangerous religion that looks all put together on the outside, but on the inside is focused on the self, is focused on what I can do to earn God's love. And if I can earn God's love, then God owes me something. And so it's a profound way of Keller unpacking what the gospel is. That it's not, antinomianism, to throw out a big word. It's not that there's no laws. It's not legalism. It's not that we earn God's love or favor by keeping his laws. but the gospel is recognizing, as he so commonly said, borrowing from another theologian, another pastor, the gospel is that we're far more broken and sinful than we like to think we are. But in Jesus, we are far more loved and accepted than we could ever dare hope. And that's really what he leaves the reader with. And so it really helped me grasp hold of the gospel in a fresh way. I wouldn't say I didn't know the gospel before then, but I read this book and put it down and just thought to myself, wow, I'm a Pharisee. I'm a Pharisee. The self-righteousness of that older brother is in my own heart. And so it really impacted my life. I think my walk with the Lord, my understanding of the gospel in a really deep and profound way. I read it with my wife. That was the second time I read it, when my wife and I were dating. And then a couple years ago, I read it with a college student at my church. And each time, just fresh reminders of the grace and beauty and wonder of the gospel. So that's the third book I'd highly recommend to you as well, The Prodigal God by Timothy Keller. So those are 3 books that have left a profound impact on me. I would highly recommend each and every one of them for you to read. John Piper's Don't Waste Your Life, Os Guinness's God in the Dark, and The Prodigal God by Timothy Keller. Get them, read them, meditate on them, love them. Love the God of the Bible who made us for himself and who welcomes us with open arms and who is so patient and good and who sovereignly holds us in the palm of his hands. That's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you wouldn't mind hitting the subscribe button, you can do that as well. There's other videos on different books that I've read and reviewed. If you have books that have really profoundly impacted you and your life, drop a comment. I'd love to hear what other people are reading. If you have recommendations for me, I'd love to hear those as well. But until next time, I'll sign off now. See you later. Have a great day.